This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Need a holiday gift that will keep her sparkling all year long? Blue Nile, the original online jeweler, has experts on hand 24/7 who can help you find the perfect piece. Beyond that, Blue Nile makes the gifting experience easier than ever with guaranteed free shipping and returns, as well as a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Right now, get 30% off jewelry at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com for 30% off. BlueNile.com.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm going to be talking to Kyle Buchanan. He has to be one of the most requested guests that we've had on this podcast. His new book, Blood, Sweat and Chrome, which recounts the making of Mad Max Fury Road, has stormed up the best-selling list and is on everybody's bedside shelf at the moment. Lots of people reading it. I can see lots of people commenting on it, and loads of people rushing back to Mad Max to give it another watch as if we needed any excuse. But we fueled, octane fueled by Kyle's revelations and appreciation of the making of this incredibly difficult, original, artistically supreme film. It puts it in a whole new light. If you enjoy the podcast, please remember to like, share, do what you can to spread the word. I very much appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at drjonty, DRJONTY, but before you do any of that, please enjoy the conversation.
You mean why did it take so long for them to be able to make Fury Road?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, two things. One is that Fury Road took a long time in itself for, book length reasons. But then also, in between the first three and Fury Road, there was a long stretch of time where Mel Gibson kind of came to Hollywood and became an incredible megastar. I think people think, because Fury Road or the Mad Max series sort of launched Gibson, that it kind of all happened in concert with everything else we remember about him. But he didn't even start making Lethal Weapon or any of those movies really until after Thunderdome, after the third film. So he became very famous. And meanwhile, George Miller was trying, to give Hollywood the same kind of try and meeting with decidedly more mixed results. He was trying to make a whole bunch of movies that were difficult because of the producers, like Witches of Eastwick, or he would spend years working on a movie like Contact, the adaptation of the Carl Sagan book, And then Warner Brothers would let him go, and he would sue Warner Brothers. So meanwhile, while Mel Gibson was having this charmed Hollywood journey, George Miller was not. And so I think it took a little while for George to say, you know what? Let me return to something that I absolutely do know how to make, that nobody could dispute that I know how to make, which is Mad Max. And I think, especially after the financial failure of Babe Pig in the City, the Babe sequel, he thought, okay, this is the thing on my plate. Hollywood doesn't always know what to do with me, but at least there's 3 other Mad Max movies that prove that, to some degree, I know what I'm doing there. And then it just took, for reasons that we could spend hours on, a million more years for them to actually get to make Fury Road after coming up with the idea for it.
What was your connection with the Mad Max series? When did you start when did you first see them?
The very first one that I saw was Thunderdome because it had kids in it. That simple. I think that's why my family thought I could watch that one. I believe my Uncle Tim showed it to me. And then over the years saw Road Warrior and the first Mad Max. And, because of that, and also because of George Miller's other films, I was anticipating Fury Road, but I had heard a lot of, bad buzz. The rumor mill was working overtime about what a difficult shoot it was, and Tom and Charlize not liking each other, and the studio having no confidence in it. But as soon as I started to see first footage from it, I was blown away. I really was. Like, the Comic-Con presentation and the first trailer, it's incredible. It just doesn't look like anything else. It doesn't even look completely like the first few Mad Max movies. It was its own imaginative beast, and you hope that the movie is going to live up to those initial images. And when I first saw Fury Road at a press screening a few weeks before it came out, I just was completely gobsmacked, awestruck, thought it was incredible. My jaw was hanging open, and from that point on, I was really, really obsessed with the movie.
I remember watching the trailer. I was on a break for I was teaching at university, and I was on a break, and I watched the trailer on my computer, and I just said to the students, "Oh my God, you've got to watch this!" And I put it up on the screen, and we all watched it together. And there was and I'd been in a similar situation where I hadn't heard any buzz, but I was kind of like, "Oh, another remake, another sort of sequel from a franchise." And then after the trailer, I was excited. And then I saw it at Cannes. I saw it in the morning press screening in Cannes. And it's one of my highlights of Cannes. And not of that particular Cannes. I mean, of my entire time going to Cannes.
For sure. I wish that they had it compete in the official selection. I don't know that George, pushes for that. His next movie is also going to play Cannes out of competition. But I mean, I really do think that would have rated very highly and perhaps won an award or two had it been in the official competition. It's just that good. It is an incredible book and an incredible movie. And I say this as the guy who's written the book on it, but I can still put it on and get totally absorbed in it as though, I were watching it for the first time.
I think the thing with your book is that it's giving people an excuse, as if they needed one, to just go back and watch the film, which is exactly what I've done. I bet that is the most immediate reaction.
Yeah, and I'm always heartened when the people who feel that are film programmers who can put the film on in their theater, as has been done with some of the Q&As that I have been doing. I went to the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn, and they played the film, and I did a Q&A after, and I felt like maybe actually this was what I was conspiring to all along, which is just more chances to see it on the big screen, because it really does, use every inch of it.
How did you get into writing the book, and why did you choose the sort of oral history as an approach?
A couple of reasons. The book initially grew out of an oral history that I had done for the Times, and that kind of was a matter of expedience, which was, in spring 2020, the movie release calendar fell apart because of the pandemic. No new movies were really coming out. Nobody knew what to do. And my job was still to cover new movies. So I was looking for other things that I could write about. And I knew it was about to be the 5th anniversary of Fury Road. And, I had heard a lot of stories about the making of that movie in the years since it had come out, not all of which were confirmed at the time. Sometimes you could sense that people were talking around them, but I thought that maybe with 5 years distance, that people would be more willing to speak freely. So at that point, I got about 22, 23 key participants, most of the cast and George and some department heads, and did a little oral history for the Times, which was about 4,500 words, I think. A lot, a whole big chunk of space for a New York Times article, but still just scratching the surface. And I knew from having spoken to all these people that there were so many stories, even things that they had told me then, and there just wasn't space to go into them. So, fortunately, other people agreed. People encouraged me to write this book. I got my agent, Rick Richter. We had a nice little publishing bidding war for it, and HarperCollins bid on it. And then I set off and interviewed like 110 more people, over the next 4 months, which is wild thinking back on it. While also working a very time-consuming day job at the New York Times, where it was award season and I was doing, 1 million interviews for that too. So, but that was the pre-vax part of the pandemic where, our lives were much more circumscribed, and I tilted the work-life balance dial much more towards work.
No sourdough bread baking for you.
No, my my sourdough bread was the book for sure.
The book, I mean, the oral history as well feels like such an exciting way, because for me the most successful oral history book is Wise Guys by Nicholas Pileggi, and and your book had a kind of Wise Guys feel to it,
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I appreciate that.
That same sort of speed and that same sort of, and people not necessarily agreeing with each other and arguing sort of between the lines.
Well, that is one of the virtues of the oral history format, is that, truth is a relative thing. And I think when you speak to a whole lot of people, you can sort of, attempt to locate the truth in the middle based on what people are telling you. But also a key part of why I wanted it to be an oral history is because if you're describing what goes into making a movie, I know it's very tempting to just totally subscribe to the auteur theory and be like, well, George Miller just did it all. But even he would say that's not true. And when you look at the incredible amount of names in that closing credits scroll, all of whom have incredible stories about the making of this movie, I wanted to give them their due. I also wanted to describe what it is like to be on a movie set where, sure, Tom Hardy and Charlize are the, 2 first build people on the call sheet, but they're wildly outnumbered by the amount of crew members around whose experiences of what's going on are every bit as valid and every bit as interesting. So I really felt like, if it were a written through book, inevitably you would get the most quotes from the famous people and everybody else would essentially be paraphrased. Whereas with an oral history, you get those quotes from everybody who worked on the production and they're all rubbing shoulders with each other.
Yeah, it sort of becomes more democratic, sort of evens out a little bit more.
It just gives you, I think, a more accurate presentation of what a Hollywood production is like. There's so many people who work on it.
And yet, at the same time, this is kind of like, I mean, it is a major Hollywood production, but they're out in the desert. They're doing a lot of their prep in Australia, and people from Warner Brothers are sort of thousands of miles away.
Yeah, although Warner Brothers would send a lot of people to set just to check up and see what was going on. Yeah, I mean, that's unconventional too. Most movies these days are shot, in studio sound stages. In fact, if you were getting Fury Road off the ground now, I'm sure that the argument would be made that you would want to shoot it, with gigantic LCD soundstage sets projecting the desert, as is done on things like The Mandalorian. And that just, there just was an emphasis from George Miller and his department heads on trying to do almost everything for real, not just actually shooting in a desert, not just actually having the vehicles drive in almost every scene instead of faking it, not just having that guitar actually shoot flames instead of using CGI to make it happen, but like living the experience, living the world. The war boys lived their characters. Everybody else, there were workshops, dramaturges brought in, all sorts of things were done to make this experience feel personal and real for the people involved. That was not always easy because, watch the movie. The wasteland is not an easy place. The characters are not going through easy things. So to live that for a really long period of time was arduous, exhausting, frustrating, sometimes depending on who you spoke to. But it gives the whole movie, this fantasy movie, an incredible reality that makes it feel more visceral.
One of the unconventional things that George does, and I really wanted to ask you this because I couldn't quite understand it, was he's shooting the whole film like in chronological order, and he's shooting it in these little bits. He's not sort of letting the scene play out. He's just, no, I just need this shot and I just need this shot. What was the reasoning behind that? I understand the chronological order, but just that idea of, no, I just need that one shot here or this angle there.
Well, so unlike almost any other movie, Fury Road was written in storyboards. That was the script. Storyboards, thousands of them. If you wanted to read Fury Road, you would fly to Sydney to George Miller's conference room at his production company, and he would take you through the storyboard room from left to right, like a conductor describing the movie to you as you watched it via these storyboards. And because it took so long to realize, because he started storyboarding this, just before the turn of the century, and then the movie came out in 2015 after countless holdups, delays, production shutdowns, etc. So this had been playing on a loop in his head for ages. That's part of why he had the confidence to keep going despite these crazy act of God setbacks. It's because he saw the movie. It was in his head and it was a masterpiece. And once he got on set, he knew exactly what he would need and what he wouldn't need. And so unlike most productions where, you'll shoot the same scene, you'll let it play out in full, and you'll just shoot it from different angles at, different close-up levels. George knew, okay, I'm only going to need a shot of Max as this is happening, and he turns his head. And I'm only going to need a shot of Furiosa putting her hand on the steering wheel and looking to her left. Things that were so incredibly specific that were difficult for the actors to connect to because it felt so disconnected from a scene or a character. So it was really tricky, in some ways, shooting in sequence would be a good thing for these actors because you are on the journey with your character. It's chronological, it's easier to map. But that specific sort of micro shot way of shooting, and these shots in Fury Road, some of them are so brief, was not an easy thing for the actors to wrap their heads around.
And obviously, to make things worse, you have that on-set tension between Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron. I was reading the book and I was willing them to sort of kiss and make up at the end, but they kind of do, but kind of don't.
Well, that's totally up to them. I mean, I think that because we love the movie, you want everyone to come out of it smelling like a rose, maybe, but it's a big Hollywood production with big Hollywood egos and stars. These things aren't simple. And that was another, important thing to me with this book, is that without feeling exploitative, I wanted to tell the full story. And, it wasn't news per se that the two of them didn't like each other, but I wanted to try to be able to go into that with a depth that we hadn't seen before, and an honesty and a candor from both of them, and from the other people who worked on that set. And I think Charlize in particular is very clear-headed and willing to explore absolutely every angle, even is generous enough to say, did I have culpability in this? How could things have changed if I had been different, or known, or had less anxieties? But it's not easy. It's not easy working with really big actors. Tom Hardy will not show up on time, and you have to account for that. Sometimes he'll show up in the second half of the day. That's part of why the movie went over. I really like him in that movie, but I didn't have to work with him. So it's a hard thing to say.
Yeah. I mean, he is good. He is great as an actor. Generally, I'm a huge fan. But boy, I could definitely do without that tardiness.
Well, yes, and so could everyone on set. It's interesting right now that Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial is underway, and I'm not wading into that. Only to say that there has been a lot of talk about Depp and how late he would come to set on the Pirates movies. And, this is something that happens a lot with A-list actors, is a lot of them sort of feel like, the movie revolves around them, which it does to some degree, and it will start when they want it to start. So will the day, and Tom had been cast when he was not an A-list actor, but when production was delayed yet again, he became that in the interim. Inception came out. He filmed The Dark Knight Rises. Like, his star was hugely on the rise. So when he got back, when Fury Road finally did get off the ground, he had, sort of A-list bona fides, and I think felt permission to flex those muscles.
I don't. It's difficult getting into the sort of psychology of that, but I would just find that so exhausting. Just do the right thing. I don't know, but that's probably why I'm not an A-list star.
Well, yeah, maybe that or other reasons, right? I mean,
I think it's just that. I think that's the only reason.
I am mortified when I arrive even 2 minutes late to something. So, but so is Charlize. Charlize is incredibly punctual. That's part of the reason that these two just did not get along. They had one of their biggest fights was a disagreement about how late he would come to set, and she was there early and sat in that war rig to prove that point. She was not going to leave until he got there.
I mean, when you think about that particular scene, which is brilliant, it's kind of like brilliant. If there was a movie of the movie, that would be the big scene, I think. But you've got George Miller, who himself is in his 70s, or he has his 70th birthday on set, doesn't I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, George was hovering around 70, as was John Seal, the director of photography.
And it's so physically arduous, the thing they're doing.
Yes, it was, and it definitely took a toll, on George physically by the end, and he had heart stents just before the production started. It's incredible what he pulled off. I spoke to a lot of younger filmmakers who, considered themselves schooled. It's an interesting thing, because some people were like, it really brims with this youthful energy, which, I think that's in the eye of the beholder. What I'm really struck by, especially after having written the book, is that I really don't think that younger people could have made this movie, because George and John Seal and Guy Norris, who's the stunt coordinator and second unit director, simply are old enough to have come of age at a time when you could do all these things for real. I mean, they made the first Mad Max movie, George did, with like virtually no permits. They would just guerrilla filmmake and go and crash things for real and not know what the consequences of any of this was. The Road Warrior, there's a famous stunt gone wrong in that where a stuntman almost dies and they include it in the film. And that stuntman happens to be a young Guy Norris who, organized all the stunts for Fury Road. So they know exactly what they can do and can't. They know what they can get away with shooting it for real and what they can't. And I just think that those are disciplines and bases of knowledge that directors simply will not have.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions, and the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com.
Going forward, because they're not brought up the same way as Miller and his compatriots. The people who are making large scale action movies these days are, by and large, like Sundance filmmakers who are hired and jump up, to a staggering budget level based on very little and have not had that expertise before jumping to that budget level, and are not necessarily even controlling their own action. They hop onto, let's say, superhero productions that are where the action is handled by the second unit director, and a lot of the action sequences are pre-vised already. So you're just there to corral the actors, and that's about it. There's rarely someone who could even come up through the system in the way that George and his compatriots did, who have the knowledge of what you can get away with. So to me, I felt like their age was an asset. While also obviously making it a more physically grueling experience, but it just wouldn't be that movie if you didn't have men who were, around their 70s or entering it, who had that base of knowledge.
Yeah, I always love the idea as well that Mad Max, the original one, earned more than Star Wars in Australia, and it was this tiny, micro budget film.
Yeah, and to go back and look at that and know what they went through to get that made is pretty crazy too. The crew nearly staged a coup because they didn't believe that George had the stuff to get this movie over the line. He had started as a doctor. So I think people were skeptical of like, okay, this is a moonlighting filmmaker. Do we really take him seriously? He also has this very mild manner where, he's not a fire-breathing Michael Bay type. And I think not everyone knew, or had the full faith and confidence in him to be able to make this. And unfortunately, that is something that Miller has had to contend with most of his filmmaking career, where he will sign on to something and almost immediately there's some sort of faction of the production that just doesn't believe in his ability to get it done. I'm hoping that with Furiosa, this prequel that he's making right now, that he will have more wind at his back, because Fury Road is such a incredible proof of concept that he knows what he's doing still, especially in this world. But you just never know. He is a very unique figure. I heard that Charlize, one of the favorite things that she liked about the book is just trying to get to know the enigma that is George a little bit better, because he is still, to a lot of people who know him well, something of an enigma.
Yeah, it is a crazy. There are these directors who, Terrence Malick is another one who have this sort of aura about them, and they don't seem to slot into that, Jodhpur riding crop, shouting at people, bullying people, sort of personality that you usually associate with director, for better or worse.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of ways to skin a cat, right? And this is a really unique situation. I think when I spoke to George about the Tom and Charlize of it all, he does have some regrets about that, and about how he handled it, or, stayed hands off. But his biggest priority and responsibility was making sure that everyone was safe doing the action scenes. Having been through that experience on Road Warrior where that stunt went wrong, and knowing how large scale, how many stunts there would be, how wild they were, I think that was the scariest thing for him, and that's what got the lion's share of his attention. But it's also worth noting that, like, for as mild as George seems to be, he has this spine of steel, and you can try to pull a movie away from George Miller, but good luck to you. He's not going to part with it. And he is going to do what he wants. He's protected by, a producer, Doug Mitchell, who aids him with everything that he wants and needs. And you're just going to have to go down George's path. The idea that you're going to wrest him from that path, not going to happen.
Yeah, and you see that in the day-to-day making of the film, where, I think one of the people that you interview says on other films, if it's easier, we'll do it that way, becomes, a solution. But with George Miller, it's like, nope, it doesn't matter how hard it is. That's the way I want it,
And he's surrounded by people, again, who just know how to make those things happen, No, and if they don't, they have a blast of a time researching it, like the polecats, the adversaries who are on poles in the third act chase of the movie. That's not something anybody knew how to do when they came up with the idea for it. So, they called in Cirque du Soleil people. They built these, they experimented with them. They had the luxury of doing all that until they could make it work. And again, that's just something where at some point, if you were some fledgling filmmaker hired out of a film festival and this was your second movie and you had this idea, people would just be like, we'll CG it. Yeah, we can make that work in CG. Would you have like the ability to sort of marshal your resources and say, no, we're going to work on this for months until we can figure out how to do it for real? Who can do that? Not many people can. And George is one of a vanishing breed.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me as well when you say that the shot in the movie in the Road Warrior of the stuntman being injured is it reminds me of Buster Keaton, sort of, jumping off a building and missing, and that's the shot that he puts in the film. He uses it,
I think there's the spirit of Buster Keaton is evident throughout this movie. George is a big believer in the power of silent films as a guide, as an editor. He edits with his wife Margaret Sixel and an incredible editing team, but the way shots inform one another in sequence, in a silent film, you see that all over Fury Road. And for as incredible as the sound is, the sound design, justifiably Oscar winning, the score by Tom Holkenborg, absolutely incredible. You can watch it silently and still glean everything. I've watched people watch it, over their shoulders on an airplane, not hearing it, but seeing it. And, it utterly stands up.
And of course, it's the same story as the general. The story structure is, a chase in one direction and then turning around and chasing back in the other direction.
Yeah, and then such a deceptively simple log line, especially when you put it that way. But there is so much going on under the hood, and that is part of the upside of this movie having taken, 15 years to essentially get made. Is that they were able to continue thinking about this and also had the desire to continue thinking deeply about absolutely every single thing in the movie. And imbue it with a lot of symbolic resonance and have these really potent themes under the surface, like female empowerment and resource hoarding by the rich and, environmental collapse. So when people say this is like Mad Max or this is like Fury Road, it's not just, it's talking about all sorts of things these days. I mean, I can't tell you since the pandemic began how often I've seen that movie used as a reference, and it's used as a reference for a million different things, not even just the things you'd expect.
Absolutely. I mean, you make the point about the legacy of Mad Max Fury Road as well, and how impactful it's been. Oh, horrible word. Sorry. What a great impact it's had on the culture, as compared to, say, to a lesser extent, something like Avatar, which you are financially successful. Nobody's really talking about it in the same way.
Well, I think Fury Road is an incredibly influential movie in some ways, and then a dead end in others. Incredibly influential in that it became so quickly like a crucial, permanent part of the pop cultural canon. It is the high watermark for modern action filmmaking. There's no question. But when we talk about influence, we talk about copycats, right? We talk about people who are like, I want to make my own Fury Road, which the first three Mad Max movies all did spawn. It spawned a very recognizable post-apocalyptic aesthetic, for one thing, that you've seen, in countless movies since. When you see post-apocalyptic or dystopian sci-fi and action films, they're almost always drawing from either Mad Max or Blade Runner. But when we talk about Fury Road's influence, without those copycats or even a means to get those copycats out there, sometimes I wonder how influential it's really allowed to be, because there simply isn't a system now where people can make action movies that follow in its footsteps. The biggest scale action movies are all executive driven, interlocking franchise universes. And within those, there are house styles, there are, executives and producers who are at every turn trying to smooth the movie out, which Fury Road also had and simply did not capitulate to. So when are we going to get anything that even approaches half of the wildness, daring, know-how, visceral filmmaking quality of Fury Road? We haven't gotten anything since. And I really do think the only thing that we'll ever get, maybe, that really feels like half a patch on it is Miller's own Furiosa.
And has he begun that then? Has he begun filming on that?
It has been delayed several times because it is a big George Miller production and these things come with the territory. But it is supposed to start fully shooting. It's full shoot this year. It's all cast up. They have made the vehicles. They are ready.
I'm really excited for it, because I do think that, despite what you said about the post-apocalyptic universe, which absolutely I agree with, but each Mad Max film is really a different sort of genre as well. The first one is a real revenge sort of Dirty Harry style film, quite gritty. Second one is a proper the chase movie, and then Thunderdome is more science fiction fantasy, and so each one feels like it's telling a very different story.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes even literally, I spoke to a lot of fans who felt that, the fact that this movie doesn't star Mel Gibson can also sort of be hand waved away, because several of the movies sort of imply that they're being recapitulated, that they're a legend that's been told, that's been passed down, and you're seeing the legend. So I think that gives you a lot of room to go with. And it'll actually be pretty interesting with Furiosa, because you will see a lot of the characters from Fury Road. You will see war rigs. You'll see settings. But from everything that I've been told from the people who are working on it, it is a movie with a different feel. There are long dialogue scenes in Furiosa. that include Furiosa. Fury Road does not have those. It is just a different kind of story that is told in that world, and I'm super curious to see how they bring it off.
Are you going to go on set and be like the
I doubt it.
the Boswell to Miller's Johnson?
I would love to be on that set, although yeah, I mean, listen, I've heard from many people involved in the movie who really appreciate the book, and George was really terrific while I was writing it, sort of authorizing people to speak to me. I talked to a lot of people who have never even acknowledged that they worked on this film. People like Kelly Marcel, who is a writer who worked with Tom Hardy, who spent months being there in production and is not credited. I don't think anybody even knew that she had done this. And a lot of people would seek George's permission before they spoke to me, and he was kind enough to always provide it. That said, I don't know that he loved the idea that this book was being written. He is somebody who has overseen every aspect of the Mad Max universe and has a level of control that comes with that. And so to know that somebody else is working on kind of a definitive document about Mad Max and you're just a participant along for the ride, I think near the end of the process, he had a little bit of concern about it. Again, he was still generous enough to sit for a final interview with me, but I could detect when we first started speaking in that last conversation that he was a little bit like, so, you've dug up a lot of these people that we've never talked about. You may have heard some stories that, weren't out there or hadn't been said in that much depth, and it's not all going to be wine and roses. So, I understand that skepticism. You never know someone's agenda. I had no agenda other than, being totally truthful and just telling the story of what it was like. But, other people might have leaned more into the scandal or what have you of it. And how does he know what it's going to be? He's been interviewed by me before, but you never know. You never know how something's going to turn out.
Yeah, the angle.
Which is all to say that I would be surprised if you were like, yeah, come on over, watch everything, write down all the things that maybe don't go as well. I don't think he welcomes that. I think he would like to be the top dog on a set and not have to worry about that.
Yeah, I don't know. He listens to this podcast, so I'm sure. I mean, we'll at least put the idea out there for him.
Well, I appreciate that.
Listen, I know, Kyle, that you've got to run because you've got a work commitment, but I want to ask you as a final question. We asked for recommended books on this podcast, so that specifically film books. Is there a film book? It doesn't have to be like your favorite or the best, no pressure, but just something that you'd recommend for our listeners to sort of grab onto, something maybe that's influenced your own career.
Yes, very much so. Actually, I have 3 that come to mind, if you don't mind.
Not at all. The more the merrier.
That were influential in just even me pointing me on the path to write this book. 2 that I had read when I was much younger, which were Monster by John Gregory Dunn, sort of written with his wife Joan Didion, about chronicling the tortured development of what was supposed to be a hard-hitting drama about, a newswoman and her struggles with alcohol and drug dependency. And then over, years of studio notes, became the frothy motion picture Up Close and Personal with Michelle Pfeiffer and Robert Redford. And his account of how that movie transformed is very funny, very scathing, and very interesting. And also, Julie Solomon wrote a great book about the making of The Bonfire of the Vanities, a very cursed production, which is called The Devil's Candy. Those were 2 pretty influential books for me, just in educating me how Hollywood worked, how movies were made, well before I even became a journalist. and they were at the forefront of my mind when I was writing this. But I definitely thought to myself, those are two definitive books on movie making, but the movies did not turn out to be that great. And it is a sort of cautionary tale because of that. And I wanted to write a book where the making of it was every bit as complicated, but the movie turned out to be a masterpiece. And I think a recent book that is also an oral history that does that really well, and where the movie is a great result, but it's also, the book is written so well, is All Right, All Right, All Right. It's an oral history of Dazed and Confused by Melissa Maris. It's really good, not just because it does all the things that you're expecting it to, which is she talks to everyone, every single person. And they all have great stories about the making of the film, but because as it goes on, and the book stretches far beyond the making of the film, the release of the film, and then starts to track, the actors as they get out in the real world. And some of them obviously become some big successes and some don't. Some go into working for AppleCare or what have you. And they look back on this time of their lives, people like Ben Affleck were like, that was the most pure filmmaking experience of my career, and so are some of the others. And you realize that what you have sort of been reading in stealth is a book about high school in the same way that the movie is about high school, that people look back on this romanticized part of their lives before their real lives had to start, or were forced to start, or maybe didn't turn out exactly the way they wanted. And so there is this sort of real poignant undertow of nostalgia and memory and lives that didn't look like people thought they would. And it just makes the movie feel more resonant, and she tells the story so well. I was really knocked out by that book.
Oh, I'll have to put those on the list.
Please do, and talk to Melissa. She's great.
Yeah, absolutely. This is how this podcast works. People recommend something, then I end up doing a podcast episode. Julie Salomon did an interview with me, did an episode back in December, I think. So that's another. Devil's Candy is such a good book.
Yes, and she recently turned it into a podcast. So
yeah, I think that's why she agreed to do the podcast
right.
with me, because she was in practice. She was very good. Well, listen, Kyle. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. Congratulations on the book. I mean, the book manages to be. I'm not going to say as exciting as the movie, because that obviously would be bullshit. But it manages to keep up. You're running after the movie. The movie is the war rig, and you're nuts, sort of trotting along trying to get onto it.
Well, it's a blessing to me, even if it was arduous for them, that the experience of making the movie reflects the themes and the momentum of the movie in a lot of ways. And so I wanted the book to feel that way too. And I'm very heartened when people say that it has that kind of momentum and reads like a freight train. That's exciting to me. When you write about an action movie, you want to feel like the rhythms of that action movie do exist in the book.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. So, I mean, well done. And I know that loads of people have been on my Twitter feed saying, you've got to do an episode. You've got to do an episode. You've got to get Kyle.
I appreciate it.
So that was my conversation with Kyle. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a little bit, we had to cut it a little bit short because Kyle had to go off and do New York Times stuff, the nerve of the man. But in a sense, it sort of fits with what we were talking about in terms of Mad Max, which is such a tight, fast, furious, much better than the Fast and Furious films, it has to be said, adventure, that our conversation was similarly muscle-bound, sweaty, and without an inch of fat. So I hope you enjoyed it. What we should have done is, in the middle of the podcast, we should have turned around and gone back the way we came, defeating everybody in our paths. All that remains is to thank Elliot Atkins for the music, Ali Howard for the art, and thank you, listener, and I'll see you, or I'll talk to you next week.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Welcome back to Two Judgy Girls. I'm Mary from the Bay.
And I'm Courtney from LA. TJG is the podcast where we spill all the tea on your favorite reality TV shows, celebrity gossip, and everything in between. We're here to bring you our unfiltered opinions, hilarious commentary, and plenty of laughs along the way.
We're two SDSU Delta Gamma sisters with a microphone and a whole lot of opinions. Each week, we dive headfirst into the wild world of reality television, from Bravo to all the trash TV you could want. We break down the drama, dissect the latest scandals, and share our thoughts on everything from the jaw-dropping moments to the embarrassing antics.
But that's not all. We're not here to just gossip. We're here to connect with you, the jurors, and share our love of all things pop culture. Whether we're dishing on the latest celebrity breakups, discussing our favorite guilty pleasure movies, or sharing embarrassing stories from our own lives, we promise to keep it real, keep it fun, and keep you coming back for more.
Come judge with us.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.